So here we are. It's my very last assignment in my Master's in Educational Technology program at Michigan State, and this is the final post. And I've decided to kind of do a lot of video for this one, just to kind of get my thoughts across in a quick manner. And the first thing we had to do is we had to read two different articles, and the first one was by Thomas Friedman, and I found this as a pretty interesting article. And one thing that I found interesting was the idea of this great inflection. And what he was saying by that is that in the past 10 years, in the last decade, there's been a huge exponential growth in the amount of technologies that exist and how the technologies have advanced. And it's led to this hyper-connected way that impacts every person in society in multiple ways, whether it's talking about jobs, whether it's talking about industries, students, and families. And he also talks about how there's an economic impact of the Great Inflection versus the Great Recession, but that's not what I really want to focus on. Um, what I found interesting was that the idea he talks about how can we adapt this idea of the Great Inflection and what is it doing to us, and he's saying that's really requiring more individual initiative, saying that technologies are increasing and growing so rapidly that it's almost like it's making individual people obsolete almost in a case. And the idea is that we need to find what is the right education for people, and not necessarily what I think is not the education that we currently have. What is the right education going to be? And he talks about this idea of passion quotient and curiosity quotient. So that started making me think about, what am I passionate about? What are my curiosities, and what do I think kids need to be passionate about, and where do their curiosities need to be? So I think the biggest thing is passion with students. We need to instill in them the ability to learn, right? I mean, in school, we're telling them they have to learn, but once they graduate, we need to make sure that they continue to learn, because as the technologies keep advancing, the job market's going to keep changing, and they are going to have to continue to learn, or they're going to be out of jobs. They're not going to be able to compete in the global market. The second article we had to read had to do with what does your classroom actually individually say to your students about what you value. And I found it really interesting that this teacher goes through this idea of they initially set the room as single rows, and then they set up into pairs and some kind of U shape versus tables, and how single rows says the teacher's the focus, and they're only the focus, and that they're the person that's giving the students the knowledge, versus if they're in a U shape, they still have pairs where they can talk into, that there's some kind of collaboration going on, but they're still all facing the front, so the teacher still is the focal point in the room, versus when they start going into tables, when they're facing each other, it kind of leads the teacher on the side as a guide, and it turns the students kind of into more of a collaboration type of atmosphere. So after reading these articles, I had to, I thought about my teaching experience that I have, and what would I want my perfect classroom to be. So this is what I created. So I felt like I should not, and for the sake of this, create just my ideal classroom that would just exist in the perfect world, but instead I looked at it, what do I currently have in my room that I'm going to be in, and how could I adapt it? So the setup, where these counters on the back side of the room, the window, where the windows are at, where these shelves are currently located, that is all current stuff in my classroom, where the computer desk is, and where the front lab teacher demonstration area is. These I cannot move around in my room. So I felt like I needed to build those in. But what do I have in my classroom that I would adapt for my own passion quotient and my curiosity quotient? Well, a couple things that I became very passionate about in the last few years was robotics. Now, I'm not currently teaching robotics, but I would really love to move back into teaching robotics, so I felt like this is something that I wanted to add back into my classroom. I felt like robotics was a great way for students to be able to problem solve, to design, and to have the freedom to create things just out of their own imagination. I felt that was a great experience for all students that were in the classrooms. Another thing that doesn't necessarily fit with what I'm currently teaching, which is chemistry, but would be a 3D printer. Again, I had that in my last teaching assignment, and I think that kind of goes along with robotics. Again, it doesn't fit, but I think, perfect world, I would love to have that again and kind of make it a part of my curriculum. So things that I also would like to have, one would be a laptop cart, whether that's laptops or tablets, because our school is not one-to-one technology, and I feel like this would be a great addition. Instead of having to move the 30 kids to the 3 computer labs in the school for 600 kids, it'd be a great way to have technology present on hand at all times. Another thing were Vernier lab quests. So these Vernier lab quests I think are very, very powerful for all science classes, and especially with teaching chemistry. I feel like it allows you to manipulate, for the kids to manipulate the data, as well as to design and create their own experiments with all the different types of probes that are existing. So I think this would be great for inquiry type stuff. Oh, I lost the words. Another thing would be Arduinos. So I think these two shelves, these would be Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, Makey-Makeys, or other maker movement type materials. So that was one thing that I found very, very intriguing in the master's classes, was this whole maker movement. It's something that I really didn't have much experience with, and it's something that I definitely would like to incorporate in the future with teaching. Doesn't matter what subject I'm in, I want to try to find a way to incorporate it. So I guess what are the key pillars or the things that I want to try to instill into students, what I want to bring into my classroom to enhance the experience? Well, I think one, I just said, I want to expand on that whole maker movement. So I want to take the idea of kind of like a current event that you might have like in a government type class, and I want to change that into not just only a science current event, like things that are happening currently in science, but I want to also expand that and have kids almost create some type of science fair. But I also want to take that one step farther. Instead of just a science fair on the current topics that we have, I want to kind of open up to, I don't want to say like a genius hour, but it would be kind of, an hour once a week, once every 2 weeks, where the kids would be able to explore their own area of science, not just even chemistry. And then at some point towards the end of the year, we'd kind of all bring it back together to show what are all the different things that the kids learned about. So I think that's where these maker materials would be very, very handy with a lot of kids, whatever they're researching. So to expand on that as well, I think I would like to have kids have some kind of authentic learning experience, and that kind of includes inquiry experiences as well. And I think, a lot of times the science classes, inquiry comes hand in hand, but I want to make that kind of like the forefront of making sure that every unit or chapter there's some kind of inquiry experience. They might not all be super in depth. Some might be more teacher led, some might be more student led. And I think those inquiry experiences can also kind of combine together with this idea of that maker fair / science fair, depending on what the students' interest is and what they're going to research. I think the third thing that I would want to do is have students leverage the power of networks and develop their own personal learning networks. Our network learning project that we did, I found that very, very powerful, and opened my eyes to how much students could learn and how much they could demonstrate just from learning outside the classroom and learning from forums, YouTube videos, and the internet and things like that. I think that'd be a very, very powerful thing to bring in, to assign kids to be able to do this stuff outside of classrooms. And again, if what they're researching is in their own interest areas, I think that would make it much more powerful as well. Also with that, I think those research projects and presentations, if there's a way that we can collaborate with social media, I found Twitter very intriguing as well. That the back channeling that we did in classes, and also the way that you can connect with experts and connect with different communities and chat groups very, very easily just from your phone, I think can be very, very powerful for students as well. I think the biggest thing that I want to instill into students in the future would be kind of showing and teaching students how to learn, instead of just focusing on what standards they need to learn. I think the biggest thing that I've got out of this class is that there's tons of different resources, technologies, and things that we as teachers can leverage to help students learn better. But the key is that the technologies and the content industries, the jobs are changing so quickly that unless students know and have the ability to learn on their own, unless they have the ability to adapt, then we're doing them a disservice. So I understand that there's certain requirements that I have to teach certain content from the state, but I also want to start trying to teach students how to learn better. How can they leverage those networks to grow on their own? How can they find an answer to a question that they have, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a personal learning network or whatnot. But I think that's going to be something I'm going to look to do in the future. So hopefully you enjoyed this little explanation of the last 6 weeks of my master's class, and hopefully you like my ideal classroom.